My parents skipped my graduation to go on a luxury resort trip with my sister, and that sentence alone still feels unreal. When I say it out loud, because for years I told myself they were just busy, not cruel, distracted, not indifferent, loving. In their own way, but the truth finally stopped hiding behind excuses on the morning of my graduation. I woke up before my alarm, heart racing with a mix of pride and nervous excitement. The cap and gown hung neatly on the wardrobe door, ironed the night before, my name stitched inside the collar, something I had paid for myself working late shifts while balancing exams. I checked my phone first thing, a habit. Hated but could not break, hoping for a message from my parents, something simple: "We are proud of you, we are on the way." Instead, I saw a photo posted by my mother, an ocean view, infinity pool, palm trees, and a caption that said, "Family time at last," with a heart emoji and my sister tagged, smiling in sunglasses, holding a drink. I stared at the screen until my chest hurt. My graduation ceremony was in 4 hours, and my parents were already on a flight to a resort I had never even been invited to dream about. They had promised they would come. They promised they would sit in the front row. They promised they would take photos, hug me, cry maybe, finally see me. Yet somehow my sister needed a vacation more than I needed them. There I called my mother. It went to voicemail. Called my father. Same result. I sent a message asking if this was a joke, if they were surprising me later. No reply. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gown, suddenly feeling foolish for expecting anything different. My sister had always been the sun in our family. Everything revolved around her needs, her moods, her milestones, while I learned early how to clap quietly in the background. My birthdays were combined with hers. My achievements were acknowledged with a nod. Her failures were met with comfort. I told myself it made me stronger. But standing there alone in my room, I felt like a child again, invisible and unchosen. I didn't cry then because I had learned how to save my tears for when no one could see. Instead, I texted the only person who had ever truly shown up for me, my best friend Maya, asking if she could come early. She replied instantly, saying she was already on her way, and that made something loosen inside me. Maya arrived with her parents not long after, carrying flowers, balloons, and the kind of excitement I had never seen in my own home. Her mother hugged me like it was the most natural thing in the world and said we wouldn't miss this for anything. Her father adjusted his tie, proudly telling me how impressed he was with everything I had achieved. And for a moment I stood there frozen, because no adult had ever spoken to me like that before. They offered to sit wherever I wanted, told me they were honored to be there. And without fully realizing what I was doing, I asked if they would come. In place of my parents, there was no hesitation, no awkward pause, just immediate yes. Of course, we would be proud to support you. I posted a photo with them before leaving, a simple picture of us smiling in the driveway, cap, gown, flowers, 3 people who chose to be there. I didn't tag my parents. I didn't write anything dramatic, just grateful for those who show up. I thought that would be the end of it. I had no idea that decision would change everything. The ceremony itself was surreal. Rows of graduates, the hum of voices, the flash of cameras, families cheering loudly when names were called. When mine was announced, I heard Maya scream louder than anyone, and her parents stood clapping, tears in their eyes, and something inside me broke and healed at the same time, because I realized family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your moment after the ceremony. A university media team approached me, asking if they could interview me for a live segment highlighting student stories. They wanted to talk about perseverance, first-generation graduates, and support systems. I agreed nervously, unaware the local station was streaming it live to social media when they asked who had come to support me today. I gestured toward my parents and said, "These are the people who showed up when I needed them most." I didn't say anything negative. I didn't mention my parents. I simply told the truth, and apparently the truth has a way of traveling faster than lies, because within hours that clip spread everywhere. People shared it, commented on it, stitched it with their own stories, praising my parents, asking why my own family wasn't there. And by the time I got home, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Asterisks. By the time I got home that night, my phone felt like it was vibrating through my bones. Notifications stacked faster than I could read them. Messages from classmates, Strangers, distant relatives, and numbers I didn't recognize all saying the same thing: we saw you, we are proud of you, you deserved better. At first, I thought it was just a small local clip, something only people near campus would notice, but then Maya showed me her screen. The video had been shared thousands of times, already reposted with captions about chosen family and emotional neglect, and suddenly my quiet, private disappointment had become public conversation. I panicked a little because I never meant to expose anyone. I only meant to survive my day with dignity. I still hadn't heard from my parents, and part of me hoped maybe they were still traveling. Maybe they hadn't seen anything yet that illusion shattered. When my phone lit up with the first missed call from my mother, then another and another, my father followed, then my aunt, then my grandmother, then cousins. I barely spoke to 78 missed calls in a few hours. I stared at the screen, frozen, unsure which emotion would hurt less: anger, sadness, guilt, or relief. My parents stayed with me that evening, sensing I shouldn't be alone. They ordered food, celebrated my graduation properly, asked about my plans, my dreams, my fears, things my own parents never asked because they assumed I would just figure it out quietly. Later that night, I finally listened to one voicemail. My mother was crying, asking why I would embarrass the family like that, why I didn't tell her the interview was live, why I let people think they didn't care. My father's message was colder, asking me to call him immediately, saying we needed to talk about my behavior, not my pain, not my graduation, not why they chose a beach over their child. Just my behavior. That was the moment something shifted inside me, because for the first time, I wasn't trying to explain myself or fix their feelings. I was tired of shrinking to make others comfortable. I turned my phone face down and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next morning, the story had grown. National outlets picked it up. Bloggers dissected family dynamics. Strangers defended me fiercely, while others accused me of being ungrateful, dramatic, disrespectful. My parents posted a statement saying there was a misunderstanding, that they loved both daughters equally, that they couldn't change travel plans. Last minute, the internet didn't buy it. Screenshots of the resort posts, timelines, and my interview painted a clearer picture. My sister finally texted me saying I should have told them to come back, saying I ruined her trip, saying everyone was attacking them because of me, and I realized she truly didn't understand what had happened, because when you've always been chosen, you never learn how absence feels. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to breakfast with my parents, who treated that morning like a celebration of a milestone, not a crisis. Her mother toasted to my future, and her father joked about learning how to watch graduation live streams, just in case. And in that warmth, I understood something important. This wasn't just about one ceremony. It was about a lifetime of being skipped, overlooked, postponed, and replaced. And now that story was finally visible, and nothing would ever go back to how it was before. The days after the graduation felt unreal, like I was watching my own life from a distance. Every time I opened my phone, there were new messages, new articles, new opinions, strangers arguing about my family as if they knew us personally, while the people who were supposed to know me best still spoke only about themselves. My parents finally came home from the resort earlier than planned, not because they missed me, but because the attention had become too loud to ignore. They asked me to come over, saying we needed to talk like adults, as if adulthood meant sitting quietly while being blamed. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see if anything had changed. When I walked into the house, everything looked the same. The framed photos of my sister on every wall, her trophies, her vacations, her smiles, my graduation photos, were nowhere to be seen. My mother hugged me tightly in a way that felt more performative than comforting, then immediately asked why I didn't defend them online. My father sat stiffly, saying the world didn't understand family matters and that airing private issues was wrong. I listened calmly as they spoke about reputation, embarrassment, stress, work schedules, travel costs, anything except the simple truth that they chose not to be there. When I finally spoke, I asked one question: why was it so easy to skip me and so impossible to disappoint her? The room went quiet. My sister rolled highs saying I was being dramatic, that it was just a ceremony, and that I always made things bigger than they were, and in that moment I saw clearly that this wasn't about one day or one trip. It was about years of being told to wait, to understand, to sacrifice. Because someone else needed more, my parents tried to soften. It's saying they loved us equally, but love without presence is just a word. I told them calmly that inviting my appearance wasn't. It's an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. I needed someone there, and they weren't available, so I chose people who were. My mother started crying again, saying I made her look like a bad parent, and my father asked what I wanted: an apology. Money, silence, I told them. I wanted accountability, not excuses, and boundaries, not guilt. That conversation ended without resolution. But something else happened that night. I left their house lighter because for the first time I wasn't begging to be chosen. I was choosing myself. Meanwhile, the media attention continued. A morning show invited me to speak about chosen family and emotional resilience. I hesitated, but my parents encouraged me, reminding me that my voice could help others who felt unseen. The interview was respectful, thoughtful, and focused on growth, not blame. I spoke honestly about how absence shapes children and how showing up, even imperfectly, matters more than grand gestures. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from people saying they saw themselves in my story. Parents saying they were rethinking their priorities. Students thanking me for naming a pain they couldn't explain. And while my parents watched silently from the sidelines, I was building something new, a sense of identity. Not defined by their approval, but by my own worth, and that scared them more than any headline ever could. In the days that followed, the media coverage escalate with interviews shared across social platforms and news websites. Every comment section became a battleground of opinions, some praising my courage, others condemning me for airing family matters in public. Yet through it all, I felt a strange empowerment that I had never known before because my truth had weight. My choices mattered, and my happiness was no longer contingent on their presence. My parents continued to support me tirelessly, attending every small ceremony, every celebration, standing proudly beside me like the family. I had chosen their smiles warm, their encouragement steady, their love consistent and visible. Unlike my own household, which remained a silent storm of avoidance and half-hearted apologies, the missed calls kept coming from my parents. 78. The first night, then another 30 the next day, then a flood that made my phone unusable. They sent messages asking me to forgive them, to understand their perspective, to realize that vacations were important too. I finally responded once, not with anger, but with honesty, saying, I forgive no one automatically. I forgive when actions reflect intention, not convenience. I explained that I did not expect perfection, but presence, and that choosing to prioritize their own comfort over a milestone in my life hurt more than they would ever understand. The responses were predictable, empty words and vague promises that I had heard all my life. And for the first time, I refused to engage further. I focused on my own life. College acceptance letters arrived, emails from scholarships, congratulatory notes from teachers and mentors, and I celebrated each victory quietly with my parents, who cheered louder than anyone else. I began documenting my experiences for a personal blog, sharing moments of joy alongside the struggles of being overlooked. It gained traction quickly, hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of readers connecting with my story. Students who felt invisible, children of absentee parents, young adults struggling to be seen. Messages poured in, stories of similar neglect and encouragements that your voice matters, your choices matter, your life matters. Through writing, speaking, and living authentically, I realized that the absence of my parents had inadvertently taught me a lesson they could not teach: love without strings, love without expectations, support without conditions. And for the first time, I felt the power of standing in my own light without waiting for validation from the very people who were supposed to provide it. I attended a community event where I was invited to share my graduation story live to an audience of peers, parents, and educators. I spoke candidly about being overlooked, about the courage it took to choose support over resentment, about how chosen family can be as real as blood relatives. I did not mention my parents directly, yet everyone understood the weight behind my words. The applause was overwhelming, not performative, but genuine. The energy in the room shifted, and I understood that this was my turning point. Not a single day of abandonment, but a lifetime of learning to prioritize myself, and through that act of claiming my own worth, the world began listening. And in the quiet moments that night, when the notifications finally stopped and I sat with my parents sharing tea and laughter, I knew something fundamental had changed. I was no longer the child waiting to be chosen. I was the young adult choosing life, resilience, and love for myself and those who truly cared, and that realization was far more powerful than any apology could ever be. As the weeks passed, the story of my graduation continued to ripple through social media, news outlets, and even casual conversations. Among people who barely knew me, my parents' attempts to regain control grew more desperate from polite inquiries to pointed accusations, from public statements insisting I had misrepresented the family to private calls demanding explanations. The missed calls increased each day. I stopped counting the voicemails, 100, 200. I learned to let them ring because each one was a reminder of the pattern I had grown up with. My mother finally arrived at my apartment, unannounced one morning, claiming she wanted to have a calm conversation about the future. I let her in out of courtesy and to see if anything had changed, but the moment she stepped inside the room, I saw the same entitled belief that she could dictate my life. Simply by being my parent, she immediately began to lecture about public perception, my sister's reputation, the family's honor, as if all of those things mattered more than the actual human being standing before her. I listened quietly, and when she paused for breath, I spoke calmly and firmly, explaining that honor without presence is meaningless, that words cannot replace attention, affection, or validation, that she and my father had chosen convenience over me repeatedly, and that the audience witnessing my graduation was not judging them for being human, but for being absent. And the more I spoke, the more I felt a strange power coursing through me, a combination of clarity, anger, and self-respect. I told her that the phone calls, the texts, the guilt trips no longer affected me because I would no longer negotiate my own worth to satisfy anyone else's ego. She tried to interrupt, saying that I was exaggerating, being dramatic, that my sister deserved more, and I snapped. I told her that my sister had been chosen every day of her life and that I had been overlooked, but I refused to make her my scapegoat, that I would not let her privilege silence my truth. Then she began crying, saying I was breaking the family apart, as if telling the truth was betrayal. I stood firm because for the first time I understood that telling the truth and standing up for yourself is not betrayal, it is liberation. Later, my father showed up unannounced, demanding a meeting, and I refused to meet alone. I called my parents and they accompanied me. The dynamic shifted immediately. He tried to assert control, saying that I was being disrespectful, that I should listen to him as my parent, but seeing them there steadied me and reminded me that authority is earned, not demanded. I explained calmly that respect is reciprocal and that our family relationship needed to be rebuilt, not on empty promises, but on consistent action, that I would accept presence over lip service, accountability over excuses, and that I would continue to celebrate my milestones with those who truly showed up. Meanwhile, the social media narrative grew. My graduation story inspired others to share their own experiences of being overlooked by parents, siblings, or guardians. The hashtag chosen family trended locally, then nationally. The story became a symbol of standing up against neglect and asserting one's worth. I was invited to talk shows, podcasts, and online panels about resilience, self-respect, and the impact of parental absence. I never spoke ill of my parents publicly, but I shared lessons learned, boundaries set, and the empowerment of choosing who truly supports you. With each appearance, the audience applauded, not because of scandal, but because they recognized themselves in my story, people who had been silenced, invisible, unseen, yet capable of demanding acknowledgement. My Parents watched some segments in private, growing increasingly frustrated that public opinion favored my autonomy and courage over their excuses. I remained calm, letting actions speak louder than words. Their public statements continued to plead. Misunderstanding, I continued to live authentically, to celebrate with those who loved me, and slowly an internal peace settled within me that no number of calls, texts, or attempts at guilt could disrupt. I began writing a memoir documenting every moment of being overlooked and the process of choosing a family beyond blood, documenting the difference between accountability and empty apologies. The contrast between presence and convenience, the power of resilience, and in those writings I found healing and purpose. For the first time in years, I was no longer defined by the absence of my parents, but by the presence of those who truly cared. And as the world read my story and responded with empathy, encouragement, and recognition, I realized that the act of showing up in your own life with courage, clarity, and boundaries is the ultimate form of self-respect, and nothing can take that away, even the ones who are supposed to choose you first. The weeks turned into months, and the story of my graduation continued to reverberate through social media, news outlets, and personal conversations. Alike, every time I logged onto my phone, I saw messages of support, encouragement, and shared experiences from people who finally felt seen because of my decision to invite my parents and speak honestly about my own family. The attention was overwhelming at first, but it also brought clarity. For the first time, I realized that the absence of my parents had inadvertently taught me to value presence, sincerity, and consistency more than words or blood ties. My parents' attempts to regain influence grew increasingly desperate. They sent lawyers, friends, and distant relatives to speak on their behalf, pleading that I reconcile public statements, apologizing for misunderstandings, begging me to remove posts or edit interviews. Yet nothing changed because I had already reclaimed my narrative and my life. I began organizing small events for first-generation graduates, inviting families, friends, mentors, and chosen family to celebrate achievements that were often overlooked in traditional ceremonies. At each event, I spoke openly about the importance of being present for loved ones and the courage it takes to choose support over familiarity. And each time I noticed the reactions in the audience. People nodding, smiling, wiping tears because they finally understood the value of being seen. I also began receiving invitations to speak at schools and universities about resilience, self-worth, and the meaning of family. And while the idea of sharing my personal story publicly had terrified me at first, it now became a mission to empower others to recognize their own value and demand acknowledgement from those around them. The impact was profound. Letters poured in from students, parents, and even adults reflecting on their own families, acknowledging the harm they had caused or the harm they had endured because they had stayed silent. The online response intensified each time a new clip of me speaking was posted. Some media outlets ran features exploring family dynamics, absence, and the rise of chosen family in contemporary society. The hashtag chosen family grew into a movement, inspiring articles, blog posts, and community groups. My parents watched this story unfold with increasing frustration, unable to regain control because my life was no longer defined by their choices or their presence. Instead, I was building a network of support, love, and recognition that was real, consistent, and nurturing. They tried to confront me one final time at my home, offering gifts, promises, and apologies, but I greeted them calmly with my parents present and explained that respect and love cannot be claimed by lineage alone, that they must be demonstrated through consistent action and presence. I told them that I had forgiven for my own peace, but that did not erase the lessons learned or the boundaries I now set. I invited them to attend future events as spectators, not authority figures, and made clear that my life would no longer revolve around appeasing them. The relief and pride I felt in that moment was overwhelming. A weight I did not even know I had carried for years lifted in the following months. I continued to write a memoir documenting my journey from abandonment to empowerment, sharing lessons about standing up for one's self-demanding presence and choosing family consciously, the writing process became therapeutic and transformative, turning painful memories into insight, guidance, and hope for others. The memoir went viral upon release, creating dialogue about parental neglect, chosen family, resilience, and the societal tendency to prioritize convenience over children's emotional well-being. The attention brought not just personal validation, but also a community of people who had felt invisible and unheard for years. I hosted workshops, live discussions, and interactive panels emphasizing that empowerment comes from claiming your own story and choosing relationships that honor your worth. While my parents faded into the background of my public narrative, I no longer needed their approval. The world had witnessed my growth, my resilience, and the courage it takes to stand for oneself even in the face of neglect and indifference. And in that space, I finally experienced something I had longed for my entire life: recognition, love, and support that was consistent, real, and unconditional. I realized that the ultimate triumph is not forcing those who abandoned you to notice you, but building a life in which your value is self-evident, and that those who truly care will always show up. And by the time the year closed, I celebrated not only my achievements, but the creation of a new definition of family, a definition chosen not by birth, but by presence, love, and unwavering support. And as I looked back at the journey from the morning of my graduation to the life I had built, I understood that being unseen can teach strength, being overlooked can teach discernment, and that the courage to choose who will stand beside you in your life is the greatest power anyone can claim. And in that power, I finally felt whole.